Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wisconsin Weather Experts on this Tuesday, exclusively here on Fox Local, as well as our Fox 6 YouTube page. Thanks for joining us again. We have a great show ahead, lots of recap. Unfortunately, more flooding, more brush fires in parts of the country. But here locally, our big story in Wisconsin as a whole has been the heat.
Yeah.
And it sticks around today in southern parts of the state.
And I'm sure you could tell by the way that we are wearing short sleeves that it feels like summer's here. I mean, stepping outside, it's going to be a big difference.
Yes.
Heading out with that summertime heat and the high dew points, which we're going to break into the difference between dew points and humidity later on in the show.
Yes.
But it's here. And of course, with summer comes all the summertime events. So a lot to look forward to locally.
Yes. And we'll, of course, talk about Thursday a lot more as it gets closer. But first, we want to go out live to one of our incredible photojournalists. Oh, my goodness.
Beautiful.
Look at this shot. We have a monitor over here, so I'm looking at it closer. Beautiful Lake Michigan, as you can see. Bo is out there right now, one of our awesome photojournalists here at Fox 6. This is in Mequon. Beautiful look at Lake Michigan. You can see the waves crashing. We have a nice breeze, but it's not too much of a breeze, but enough to make it feel maybe a little bit more pleasant. I'm sure it is absolutely gorgeous by the lake right now. Can Bo hear us? Our producer Delaney, is he mic'd up? Do we know? Okay, Bo, can you hear us? I'm just checking in real quick.
I don't know if you can shake the camera up and down. Maybe not.
I just wanted to ask how it felt immediately near the lake, because I'm sure it feels a lot more refreshing than even here at the station.
Absolutely. And we've been focusing, Stephanie, on the water temperature too, because it's still in the 50s. So even though you might be thinking on these warmer days, let me go down to the beach, take an extended swim, we still can have the dangers of being in the waters, which are in the 50s, the mid 50s, for a longer period of time. Now, of course, dipping your toes in, maybe making some sandcastles or something on the sand with the kids will be great, but it just is a very refreshing shot and really just makes us realize how much we love the summer months, and they go by quicker than we would like. So just getting down to the lakefront obviously is going to be something you might want to do for the upcoming week.
Yep, absolutely, and this weekend too. Well, beautiful image there, a beautiful calm view of the water. Unfortunately, there have been parts of the country where water is the last thing they want to see.
Yeah, we've been dealing with some flooding in West Virginia, and that's continuing to unfortunately cause a devastating scene here from the videos that we're showing currently.
Yeah, this is video of crews working yesterday on Monday to remove cars that were submerged in high water. This is in Wheeling, West Virginia. I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday too. Governor Patrick Morrisey says at least 6 people, including a 3-year-old, have died in the flooding, and 2 others are still unaccounted for. Search and rescue efforts are resuming Monday morning, or excuse me, this morning, and officials continue to urge people just to stay off of local roads while all of this water is receding. And you know, that's one of the hard parts about floodwater. Of course, you know, in the moment, you don't know how deep it is. So we always say, turn around, don't drown. But as it's receding, you don't know what you're going to encounter under some of that floodwater, the debris and stuff like that. But this has just been absolute devastation in this part of the country.
Yeah, it's been terrible, especially with the fatalities of people. People are still missing, and they're just trying to figure out how much devastation's around and how to clean up for it, in addition to finding the missing bodies, which have been, you know, swept away from these floodwaters. Even had some amazing footage I've seen on social media of an apartment building where the waters are just gushing out of the windows, and then half of the building is gone. It's terrible. So they're trying to recover there, and you bring up such a valid point, Steph. It's the debris that is left, which is why we always say, even though you might know where a road is or a sidewalk is, you don't know if there's going to be sharp debris, such as a metal part from a car, a building. You don't know if that hole is going to be there, so maybe something washed out the road where you could easily fall in, and of course that current can sweep you away. So we'll continue to track that and some of the flooding, which is unfortunately going to be hitting the areas of the East Coast through the upcoming days.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of something else a little devastating, fires, but we're switching to an area off the coast of the U.S. This is going to be in Hawaii, where a fast-moving brush fire fueled by force winds forced the evacuation for over 100 homes on the island of Maui. Now, remember, Maui, we did talk about another fire that happened 2 years ago in Lahaina. That was the historic town that was destroyed, and this devastating fire was about 60 miles from that. So not a good site there. Initially, it was estimated that it was going to cover about 500 acres, but due to aerial surveys that they re-looked at, it ended up being about 330 acres. Fire officials say that the fire tore through the area, and it's been described as a remote, challenging terrain. Maui is considered to be having 100% drought conditions. So we talk about even being near an ocean, it's not easy. I mean, you think about, well, why can't we put out these fires if there's water all around it? How do you get the water to the challenging terrain there where it is more mountainous? It's, you know, it's got the volcanic activity and the elevation. You need planes, you need people to lift that water up, and it's not easy to do.
Right.
Another thing we've been talking about with wildfires, same thing with Canada. You know, we've had that smoke. Why can't we just put out the fires? Well, it can just take a tiny ember, the smallest amount that can easily be picked up by the wind, go on something else and ignite it, and those winds so strong just fuel it quickly. So a lot easier said than done, obviously, to put those fires out, but something we're continuing to track there as well.
Also, just an interesting note too, I know I was asked this question a few months back at a school talk. It was just incredible. But again, kind of the same concept in California when we had all the big fires last year, you know, with the ocean being right there and all of that water, you know, we have to remember that that's salt water and that really corrodes the plains. So they have to be careful with how much they actually use because it could do more harm than good. So just something to keep in the back of your mind there.
It's a good fact to know.
It is. I know. Thanks to our photojournalist, Jeff Frings, who is a airplane aficionado. He knew so much about this topic, so shout out to him.
He's a wealth of knowledge. I just saw him in the
Teaching
hallway.
me. I know. We love him. Okay, well, this is just crazy video of this past weekend. Maybe you were watching the U.S. Open. Oh my goodness. There was an hour-and-a-half rain delay. I believe this was on Sunday. And look at that poor golf course. They're trying to squeegee the water to make it a little bit more playable. I know some of the athletes or the golfers who were taking part in this mentioned that even with all of the work that the crew is doing right here, the course just was not the same after the rain. But this was in Pennsylvania, so the U.S. Open was this past weekend. It was held at Oakmont Country Club in Pennsylvania. They picked up a ton of rain. And this is what you have to do when you are a grounds crew for a golf course.
You know what, Steph? When you showed me this video, I thought I didn't see this on TV, but what an incredible sight! And you want to talk about backbreaking work? I mean, you know what it's like to put some sort of vacuum sometimes or a broom on carpet. I mean, imagine doing that and the weight of that water you're having to push. So kudos to them, especially for clearing that water out so they can continue the competition.
And they got it going exactly. Okay, let's talk more about rain. More about heat. Let's dive into our regional weather as we look ahead to the next couple of days. Now, here's a look at our flooding headlines, because I know we talked about that West Virginia flooding. They're still, even at this hour, dealing with either flood watches and even a handful of still flash flood warnings, or at least one at this point. So you can see out east the spots that are still dealing with, number one, still some rain today, but number two, the after effects of all the heavy rain from the last couple of days. And then there is another spot with some flood watches towards the southwest of us across Kansas and Oklahoma, as well as northwestern Arkansas. This spot, too, has dealt with a ton of rain, not just over the last week, over the last couple of months. Also a spot that could deal with heavy rainfall going forward today. This is the Weather Prediction Center's heavy rainfall outlook for today. I mean, a moderate threat for flooding across parts of Kansas, and unfortunately, those same spots, you know, parts of the Virginias into Pennsylvania that could be dealing with more heavy rain today. Also a severe threat lines up pretty closely with the spots that could see some of that flooding rainfall, but you can tell there's not only an enhanced risk for severe weather today down south, which is that level 3, there is also a moderate, which is in red, and that's a level 4. Now here locally, we are under a marginal threat, meaning if we do end up seeing any storms popping this afternoon, which there's only a slight chance, we could see a stronger severe storm. I think the better chance for thunderstorm activity as a whole here in the Great Lakes region and in Wisconsin will be tomorrow. You can see just a lot of unsettled weather out east, just some spotty and scattered showers and thunderstorms the way it's been the last couple of days. 2 more organized areas, though fairly weak at the moment, from parts of southern Nebraska into northwestern Kansas, and then just about to cross over here into Missouri and northwestern Arkansas. A couple of severe thunderstorm warnings even farther out towards the west. Zooming in on Wisconsin. We're dry right now. We are all enjoying some sunshine after what was still a pretty active day yesterday north of the Milwaukee area. Northern western Wisconsin dealt with showers and thunderstorms and even some severe weather. Now, we do have a cold front draped across parts of our area right now. This is actually going to slowly move through late today, and that will provide a drop in temperatures for tomorrow. Also going to keep those rain chances in. Once again, closer to sunset and then into the day tomorrow, we'll have the chance for a few showers and thunderstorms across southern parts of the state. So the rest of today, most of us are looking dry. We'll see more storms developing towards the south, inching their way into our area by Wednesday morning. And then notice how it's on and off then across southern and then eventually central and northern Wisconsin throughout the day Wednesday. Strong storms are a possibility at times, so we'll watch anything that moves through our area. There is the chance that just after dinner time, we have a little bit of dry time before maybe just a few lingering showers overnight into early Thursday. Otherwise, Thursday is actually shaping up to be a nice day. The rain chances are even lower than what they were yesterday, which is some great news with all the festivities happening across the state and certainly here in Milwaukee between Summerfest and Juneteenth celebrations. Anything we see tomorrow, though, could still be strong or severe. Now, Milwaukee areas and towards the south, we are under that level 2 slight risk. The better chance is actually towards the southeast of us. You can see this orange area, which includes parts of southern Michigan, Indianapolis, down into Missouri, under that level 3 enhanced risk. Another big story for today is the heats, especially in southern Wisconsin. High temperatures up towards the north, not quite as extreme, but out ahead of that cold front, we're the ones down south here that are going to see high temperatures in the mid to upper 80s to low 90s. And we're in good company. There is still a lot of heat across the U.S. right now. 90s the farther south you go, certainly across the southern plains, and triple-digit heat once again still expected towards the southwest. We're talking days and days of triple-digit heat for the southwest, which is not terribly abnormal, but some of these numbers are approaching record territory. Back closer to home, because this cold front's passing through later, we are going to cool a little bit for Wednesday. In fact, potentially just below the average mark in our lakeshore communities. But then we climb right back to 80s for Thursday and Friday, and then the weekend. We think today's hot. The weekend is looking even more hot, even more humid. High temperatures in the 90s. We could have dew points both weekend days, low to mid 70s, and that means feel like temperatures or heat indices in the triple digits. So we are looking at some dangerous heat coming towards the weekend. But for now, dew points still staying high today, dropping just a little bit through the rest of the week. Best day for dew points does look to be Thursday. So once again, Thursday shaping up to be pretty nice for us. That's a look at your regional weather. We still have plenty more to talk about on Wisconsin Weather Experts. We'll take a live look outside right now. Once again, our photojournalist Bo is out in Mequon looking at that beautiful Lake Michigan. Oh my gosh, it looks stunning out there right now. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Wisconsin Weather Experts. Before the break, we talked a lot about the heat and the humidity that we have here in Wisconsin today. And there's something we look at as forecasters to really tell us what the humidity is going to be like.
Yeah, and people ask and wonder all the time, probably one of the most popular questions is, what's the difference between heat, or what's the difference between dew points and the humidity? Why do we look at the dew point rather than the humidity? Well, Chief Meteorologist Tom Wonks is going to dive deeper into that topic and hopefully answer your question.
Well, you often hear us talk about dew point, and sometimes you hear us talk about relative humidity. What do they mean? What's the difference between the two? Well, first, let me show you dew points. Now, dew points look somewhat similar to air temperatures because they're both measured the same way, in degrees. So when we are reporting this on the news, you are looking at a dew point, which is degrees Fahrenheit. Typically, when you get above 60 degrees in the dew point department, that's when it starts to feel a bit humid outside, a little bit more tropical. If you get above 70, oh, it really starts to feel tropical outside. So that's the dew point, kind of a humidity gauge, if you will. There's a whole lot of science in association with the dew point as well, but just from a practical standpoint, it's a humidity gauge. Now, relative humidity, you would think to yourself, oh, well, this is how it feels like, right? If the relative humidity is 80%, it must be really humid, right? But if the relative humidity is 40%, well, there's probably not much humidity in the air. That is incorrect. And that is why we typically never talk about relative humidity on the air. Let's dive deeper into this here. So dew point, as I mentioned, it's a measure of moisture. You use it as a humidity gauge. Again, when the number is above 60, you know it really starts to feel humid. When it gets above 70, it really starts to get tropical. Relative humidity, however, is different. Relative humidity is how much water is currently in the air now versus how much water the air can hold at the current temperature. So think about that for a minute. Relative humidity is indeed relative, right? It's relative to the current air temperature. So think about this for a second. In the morning, relative humidity levels are typically at their highest. Why is that? Because the air temperature is at its coolest, right? So the temperature is, in effect, closer to the dew point, making the relative humidity higher. Now consider this scenario. It's a summertime day. It's 90, 95 degrees outside, and the dew point is 60 or 65. Well, the relative humidity is not going to look very high on a relative humidity map percentage-wise because it is relative to that 90-degree temperature. Does that make sense? So it may feel extremely humid, but you're saying, well, why does the relative humidity only read 40% when I'm basically sweating like crazy walking outside? It's because the relative humidity is just that. It is relative to the current air temperature. Now, dew point, on the other hand, just to go back to that quickly, yes, that is number one, the point at which dew forms. So it's called the dew point. So in the morning hours, temperature cools to the dew point. The air can't hold any more water, so it condenses out into tiny water droplets known as dew on the ground. That's also the case when you have fog, when the air temperature and the dew point are equal, so the air can't hold any more water, so it forms a stratus cloud on the ground known as fog. Relative humidity from an operational standpoint, so as meteorologists, we really use relative humidity for wildfire forecasting. When it gets so dry, especially relative humidities of 25% or below, that's when wildfire danger really becomes an issue. So you look at relative humidity, you look at what the current drought conditions are and wind conditions. All of those really come together to produce some intense wildfire type days, potentially, if everything comes together. So that's what we use relative humidity for. Dew point, you want to use that for everything else. How humid it feels outside. I haven't touched too much on the science of dew point in terms of from a forecasting standpoint, but when you get the really humid air in place, dew points above 60, that now you're in thunderstorm range, if you will, for lower cloud heights, which that can impact tornadic type weather and things like that. So there's so much more to dive into at a later date with dew point. But again, just what you need to know right now, use dew point for everything. Unless you are looking at a wildfire type situation or a grass fire situation, dew point is where you want to go. Tell your friends, tell your family, the higher the dew point, the more humid it feels. But don't look at relative humidity. Again, it can be very confusing and quite misleading unless you're talking about wildfires.
There you go. It's such a complex, it sounds so simple.
Yeah.
And I think the basics of it are simple, but relative humidity is the one that I think that's just a little bit more complex. And it's got its benefits, but here I think helpful for us is dew points. So there you go.
Yeah, it's going to be the easiest thing, again, to define that tropical moist air versus air that's very dry. And like I was telling you over the break, it's like saying if we were in winter and we said there is 80-90% humidity, what does that mean to you? That's where it gets a little confusing.
Right.
So definitely, again, you can always rewatch this on YouTube for our Wisconsin weather experts to get that little refresher of Tom explaining it again. One other thing we talk about with this moist air coming into play, it's sweating, right?
Yes, exactly. When we have the heat and we have the humidity, we obviously know we sweat a lot. Meteorologist Holly Baker has an explanation as to why that is.
All right, folks, so it's getting warmer and warmer outdoors, and everybody likes the warmer weather because it's definitely weather that you want to get out, enjoy the sunshine. And then it starts to get hotter and hotter, and then you add in the other H word, which is humidity. So that's also going to make it feel really bad outdoors as far as your comfort levels. And then guess what? Your body starts to react to those temperatures. We start to sweat. But why do we sweat? Well, it's really simple. We sweat so that we're able to cool off. But let's look at some of the science behind it. Our body typically likes to stay around 98.6 degrees. So typically anything warmer than 98.6 degrees, that pretty much makes our bodies really hot. And so we usually start to sweat, and that sweat is going to be released from out of our skin. That sweat is really what helps us cool off. The water from the sweat will typically evaporate. Now, the science behind this is that evaporation is really what's going to help you cool off, because that draws the heat out of the body through a process called evaporative cooling. So again, we sweat because our bodies want to cool off to make it back to that threshold of 98.6 degrees. But that's not always the case on some days, especially when it's muggy outdoors. When on our muggy days, sweat fails to evaporate from the skin, so that keeps you warmer, and it also leaves you feeling a little bit more on the stickier side. So you definitely would appreciate sweating more, especially now you know that it helps cool your body off.
Thank you, Holly. It's just that time of year, and there you go. We all know how our body works, right? Okay, let's take a live look outside right now in Mequon. Once again, beautiful view out over Lake Michigan. Oh, the grass is green. There's that nice breeze. The lake looks so peaceful, and a lot of people out and about too. We have just a little bit more left on Wisconsin Weather Experts. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for staying with us here on Fox Local. We're going to talk about native plants now before we go. You know, you're always driving, you see all those beautiful, tall flowers, native plants on the side of the road. There are some benefits to that. So this is the latest from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. They're obviously good for the environment, but the DOT says that bees and butterflies, they pollinate wildflowers, crops, and contribute to the health of Wisconsin's ecosystems, the flowers, of course. Native plants help reduce flooding, too, which is maybe something you don't think about. They create space for pollinators and are less costly to maintain, and they absorb runoff. So there you go. As you're driving and you see some of those taller plants or flowers, just know that they're more than just something pretty to look at. They do have benefits to our ecosystem and to runoff and rain and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so it's not just, you know, weeds or some sort of random plant someone put there. They have a purpose. They're native, so they're definitely helping us out. And again, just, you can appreciate it a little bit more so when you're driving around through the upcoming weeks and months.
There you go. Okay, well, the heat is on today. Make sure you stay hydrated. Wear that sunscreen if you're going to be out and about. Just enjoy this peaceful view of Lake Michigan. Boats out over the lake. We'll see you here tomorrow at noon.